Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Welcome again to the CPG Guys podcast. I'm PVSB, one of the aforementioned CPG Guys. I'm also Senior Vice President of Commercial Strategy at Fetch Mobile Consumer Engagement Platform. Unfortunately, my regular co-host and co-conspirator, my partner on this journey, Sri, could not be with us today as he's somewhere on a beach in Mexico contemplating whether to put an umbrella in his mocktail of choice. At his place today, we have an able-bodied replacement. He's our very own Omni Comment Thursday host. Of course, I'm talking about Brian Gildenberg from Confluencer Commerce. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Peter. How are you? And my only question with Sri, is a mocktail a fake cocktail or a cocktail he drinks while he's mocking somebody?
No, well, I know what it would be in your and my case, but we'll just, actually all three of us, it would be mocktails. Yeah, we're all three of us don't drink alcohol. We're like the most boring podcast hosts in the world, but that's okay. We like it. That's how we roll. It was great to see you in Seattle this week. I know you and I were there with some of our Fresh 4 colleagues drafting up this year's Omnis Awards. You know, we had obviously Andrea and Melissa and Sri, and we were at the auspicious and rather palatial offices, I might say, of Volume Group, right? But their next door neighbor, a little loud and rowdy. I don't know what was going on.
Yeah, you know, I really think Andrea's going to have to do something with him, like, you know, marry him or something.
Yeah. Her husband shares the office next door to her, so that's why we like to make fun of him. But in any event, thank you, Brian, for joining us today. And before we get to our guests, I want to remind our audience that all of our content, you can find it. Just go to cpgguys.com. We have a great website. It's organized by themes within each of the episodes. We have a merch store, and we have hyperlinks to all sorts of other content. And of course, sign up there for a newsletter that Brian's going to help launch in the coming year. I'm really excited about that. If you aren't already following us on LinkedIn, you got to. I mean, there are 18,000 other people who have done this.
What are you doing?
I know. What are you doing? You're not following the CPG Guys on LinkedIn? I mean, come on. You're just not cool if you don't have that follow badge pushed. But seriously, though, do follow us because we produce a whole lot of content. We also manage 2 closed groups on LinkedIn, Retail Media Professionals and CPG E-Commerce. There'll be links to those in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode. There are only 2,000 people in those 2 groups alone. You should check it out and commingle with some people who are in your industry segment. We're on lots of other social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram, and even TikTok. Brian, we're TikTok stars. I can't believe it.
Yes, I know. My 14-year-old daughter has never been more confused.
I'm confused. But in any event, please do check us out on all the other social media platforms. There are hyperlinks on cpgguys.com. And of course, we have a very large family of content creators here at the CPG Guys, of course, with Brian. We start with our sister podcast, the FMCG Guys, hosted by Efrain and Daniel. And of course, we have a week of programming on our LinkedIn page. Sundays, it's the Fresh 4 with Andrea and Melissa. Monday, Sean Halter from Mio Park Marketplace brings us CPG Bites. Tuesday, it's the Retail Media Minute with Jeff Malmutt from Mindshare. Wednesday is a new episode of the CPG Guys. Thursday, we have the Gildenberg Omni Comment with our very own Brian Gildenberg. Friday, we feature the CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer. And of course, Saturdays, it's a creature double feature, Brian. We have a new CPG Guys episode along with a new segment called Tech Talk by Pair Commerce. That's 7 days a week. If we could split out that one on Saturday, we'd have 8 days a week and we'd be a Beatles song. It would be phenomenal.
We would be, yes. So we'd have a ticket to ride.
Yeah, we would. And lastly, I want to say we're very proud to partner with Next Up, also known as Network of Executive Women, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and to promote the cause of gender equality and career development. Please visit nextupisnow.org/CPG Guys. There's a hyperlink in the liner notes of this episode to learn more about this mission-driven group. And of course, we're going to be official partners of Next Up in 2023. We have 50 memberships that we're going to be giving out to female entrepreneurs, so they can avail themselves of the incredible educational resources and networking capabilities that Next Up provides. So stay tuned in January for more information on this. All right, let's get to the main event. Capturing disparate data from every consumer touchpoint and consolidating it into a single universal solution that helps anyone looking to invest, innovate, or grow in the consumer ecosystem to identify emerging opportunities. It's really been a marketer's dream for decades, not just years, Brian, like decades. I've been talking with brand marketers in my 30-year careers for the entire span about, God, how do I create a single source of truth? Universal data can enable brand comparison, trend analysis, and consumer insights. And the term universal data was coined by Helio, with whom we are partnering on this episode. The Helio platform integrates the universe of current digital, social, online and offline sales performance data and puts it behind a single pane of glass so that consumer goods professionals can innovate, invest, and grow their businesses with confidence. Joining us for today's episode to speak about this revolutionary platform are two leaders from Helio, Kathy Slowinski, who serves as the Chief Product and Revenue Officer, and of course, Erik Andrejko, Helio's Chief Technology Officer. Kathy, Erik, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Peter. Hey, Brian. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us, Peter and Brian. Always excited to talk about data on a Friday.
I know. We talk about data every chance we get. My background is market research and quantitative research and all that. So I love this topic. We talk a lot about retail media on this podcast, but we also talk a lot about data and insights. So it's a great opportunity. Hey, before Brian and I get to the questions we've prepared for the conversation, Kathy, would you let our audience know where on the web they can learn more about Helio and give us a brief introduction to your company?
Yeah, so Helio is actually formed from Circle Up. Circle Up started as a marketplace where they were trying to connect funding to emerging startup brands. It then eventually became an asset management business. So we had a equity portfolio and a credit portfolio. And Helio was built about 7 years ago to help both those portfolios spot emerging brands that they could either help lend money to or invest in. Our equity portfolio, I believe, has over 30 brands in it. Some of the brands you may have heard of, like Liquid IV, 4505, RQ Bars, Koya, Partake Cookies, all pretty successful brands. And every single one of those brands were found using the Helio technology. On our credit side, we've lent out over $1 billion with less than 2% loss ratio for a lending business that is a very low loss ratio. And it's because we've been able to use Helio to find emerging brands that need capital to continue to grow in the CPG space.
Wow, that's great, Kathy. Thank you. To our audience, you don't have to write that all down. Here's the great news. We're going to include in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode links to both Kathy and Erik's LinkedIn profiles, Helio's LinkedIn page, and of course the corporate website. So we really appreciate you giving us that summary. Why don't we get to the questions? I'm going to kick it off. Let's start with Erik. Why don't you share a little bit with us on your background and your journey that has brought you to Helio, and then you can pass it on to Kathy to do the same, if that's okay.
Excellent. Yeah, I've spent my career here in Silicon Valley, where I'm based, in early stage and growth stage technology companies, really applying data to help humans make complex decisions. I'm a data nerd for sure at heart. Sounds like I'm in good company here. And I'm actually somewhat of a neophyte, especially compared to this group and certainly your audience, to the CPG space. My journey to the CPG space really started because I had co-founded a food tech startup, and that food tech startup was acquired by a small company called Kraft Heinz. And so I spent many years inside of Kraft.
Feisty little startup. We think they're going to make it.
Yeah, I think they'll be around for a little while. Yeah, and so I spent years after the acquisition inside of Kraft Heinz, really understanding some of the needs and challenges of running a CPG company, kind of at all scale, and understanding the CPG landscape, and really understanding consumer insights and trends that relate to things like product development. So I'm very excited to have joined the Helio team, because I'm also passionate about product innovation. I love finding new CPG products myself. And that's what brought me to this space.
Thanks, Erik. Kathy, how about you?
So I'm originally from Chicago, which I like to call the birthplace of CPG data. Every major CPG data company has some tie back to Chicago. And I've spent most of my career in data analytics on the ad tech side and in market research. So earlier in my career, I was the vice president of product for a small data company called Spins. You guys may have heard of them in the natural and organic channel. I also worked with a company to export American CPG products into the Australian market while I lived in Australia. And then last, when I returned from Australia, I was the SVP of product for InfoScout/Numerator. So again, my ties back to Chicago have landed me at these CPG data companies. A couple years ago, someone reached out to me and told me about Helio. I did not believe this data set was true. I actually, as part of the interview process, said, show me the data, and they did, and I was blown away. And that's the reason I came over to Helio about a year and a half ago to start up the commercialization of the product.
Show me the data. Are you sure you're not from Missouri? Because you said you're from Illinois. Is it the Show Me State?
Yeah.
Kathy, you're in good company because I'm also an alum of Spin. So I know of the DNA of which you are made. Brian, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, and if you want to do a funny origin story, Kathy, on the on InfoScout and Numerator, if you go back a long time, the actual first person that ever connected InfoScout/Numerator to their new overlords at Kantar was me when I worked at Kantar about 107 years ago. So I ran into Jared at something and connected the two. So to that end, I obviously love a good origin story. So we've got your background here. We've got we've got Bruce Wayne's parents. We've got everything we need, but we don't have the radioactive spider moment when Helio was born. So Erik, I think, were you the one that got bitten by the radioactive spider to give it the superpowers, or how did that work?
Something like that. I think
let's option the Marvel movie for this thing.
Yeah, the team deserves a lot more credit than I do. So, but I can tell you how it all went down. Like Kathy mentioned before, kind of the initial motivation for Helio was to scale the activities that a typical investment analyst would perform kind of by 1 million to 1 billion times. And that would be really, can we find emerging brands and can we analyze emerging brands to understand what is the ultimate growth potential based off of a variety of different signals? And so we built Helio to go out and scour the world looking for brands that are new or newish to the scene, ideally in the original use case before the first 5 million in revenue or even the first 1 million in revenue. And can we then build a ranking system that will analyze the data we have available to us about brands from online and offline signals to understand which of these brands are really going to have potential to resonate with consumers and really be a breakout success. And then essentially score every brand in the universe. And so that our investment team could spend their time focused on the brands that had the most potential based off of early signals. So that's kind of how Helio was originally built. And the interesting thing we found is that the more data we added to the system, the better and better our ranking became.
Wow, that's terrific. And now I understand, Kathy, based upon your background at Spins, the value of understanding product attributes and how that could be intertwined with all the data set to make it an even more powerful predictive model. And my question for you, Kathy, is, it was obviously, as you described, built as a tool for Circle Up to be able to identify brands to invest in and start making those educated bets on the roulette table, knowing which numbers had a better likelihood of showing up when the wheel spun. How have you evolved Helio's capabilities and applied it to the software that you're now actually commercializing outside of Circle Up and making available to other brands who want to use this to evaluate potential areas of innovation and investment?
Yeah, definitely. There's been a ton of work done to Helio since I've joined. When I joined, there was no self-service interface. We only had a handful of small customers. And what we've done is over the course of the 18 months has built out a self-service interface for our customers to, number one, be able to log in and do these analyses themselves. We still have a professional services arm that we just like every other market research company, we use that professional services arm to answer customers' questions, figure out how to solve some of their problems. And then eventually we do it so many times with customers that we decide to productize it into the platform. Initially, we were very focused on that investment use case, but we quickly, as we started to partner with large companies like Coca-Cola, realized they don't only need this data to invest, they need to figure out what type of products to launch into the market. And that's sort of the direction we've been going in. So we've gone from invest to innovate, and now we're even starting to tickle the space of how do we grow these companies beyond just your innovate and launch the right products into the market. What is the right white space to jump into?
That's awesome, Kathy. And that example is good. Do you have some other examples of some of the clients you've engaged with and some of the use cases? I mean, it sounds like you've got some new product development stuff. You've got some growth strategy work. What are some of the use cases that you've developed post-investment?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the use cases, and basically the one I would say we are best at because we've been doing it for 7 years internally, is our invest use case. So customers will come to us and they are looking for new companies to put into their acquisition pipeline. So they're looking at a sourcing use case. Help us find a fast growing product that is born from the D2C world, for instance, that isn't in anyone else's data sets because point of sales data or panel data may not pick those brands up just yet. And help us identify a brand that has a bunch of potential features or functionalities that we're looking for and put into our acquisition pipeline. Help us even diligence how fast that brand has been growing, what's their white space, et cetera. So companies like British Tobacco and Consolidation have come to us and said, we never want White Claw to happen and us to not know about it as it's happening. And so those are, for instance, the type of use cases we're working with customers on. Coca-Cola came to us on the innovation front and said, help us find flavors that Gen Z population is interested in. And so over a course of a couple of weeks, we did some analysis with them, gave them our prescription basically in that space, and they launched a new product. I believe the product's called Starlight. And so it's doing really well. We're actually even creating a measurement functionality so we can measure in the leading indicators such as social media following, reviews, what sort of trending, even online traffic to Coca-Cola's specific website for that product before it even starts to show up in panel or point of sales data.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah.
You must get a ton of feedback from the marketing side of things rather than the research side about people talking about the emotional connection, the artistry, the whatever it is. How do you have that conversation with people that might be more data resistant, if you will, to what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I may even hand this off to Erik a little bit, but we scour reviews, right? And we have a sentiment analysis that basically says whether the sentiment is positive, negative, or neutral. And we can do a ton of sentiment analysis about a product, what customers are loving, what they're hating. We can even analyze down to full sentences. It isn't just single word sentiment analysis anymore. Erik, do you want to give a little bit more technical background on how we're doing that?
Yeah, I mean, basically what we do is we take consumer reviews in real time, essentially, as products come out, and we parse them to understand not only what consumers think about the product, but perhaps more importantly, the why. So consumers are amazingly eloquent in describing what they do and do not like about things. Sometimes to the chagrin, I think, of many people delivering products, because consumers got 20 opinions about every product, it seems like, and they'll write it down in a review. And so we, like Kathy said, we can parse that out by doing a bunch of sentence segmentation. And then for each sentence, we can understand, is it about a product attribute, about the customer experience? Is it about the price? Is it about, maybe someone mentions who suggested they use the product? And so we can parse all that out. And then we can aggregate that at scale to understand what is really driving the consumer sentiment one way or another for a particular product or particular brand.
So much what we're doing with Helio, we are bringing lots of different data sets together. So we're bringing the qualitative piece to the quantitative piece. And that's back to your question, Brian. How do you answer those questions? You merge those two data sets together. And again, not a lot of data companies are doing that out there.
No, I was going to say you're trying to win the hearts and budgets of people that aren't always the most data responsive groups in the world. So I was just curious as to how you did that. Thanks for dimensionalizing that. That's cool.
Brian, I think that if Coke's main competitor, Pepsi, had been able to access this information, they might not have released Pepsi Nutmeg over the holidays. I don't know of many millennials and Gen Zers who are craving a cola flavored with nutmeg on top of it. But maybe I'm wrong. What do I know?
Is that implying that non-millennials and Gen Zs might be? Because I don't know that. I think I could submit my feedback to Helio on that now if they want to.
All right. We'll write a review and let them scrape that. That'll be good. Hey, I want to remind our audience that Brian and I are speaking today with Kathy Slowinski and Erik Andrejko from Helio. Erik, so what makes Helio different than other types of solutions? I think you've given us some pretty clear ideas around that, but let's kind of bring it together. How is it that you're able to capture, like the big thing to me is all the disparate data sets, right? Everything we talked about when I opened, that's a whole lot of data, right? And particularly when you get to emerging brands, trends, products, there's just so much data. How is it that you're able to harmonize that, right? And bring these types of insights to a point where the people using your tool can action on it?
Great question. And it's really kind of the heart of the matter, I think, in your question there, and where we spent the most time as a technology company investing is we recognized early on that this wasn't a single kind of data set that was going to be holding most of the answers of what's happening in the CPG space. But every time we added new data, things got better and better and better until we reached the stage we are today, where it's 200 plus data sources that all need to be stitched together. And it's that stitching together. It's a process we call internally entity resolution, where we are resolving references to products and brands across these different sources, so we understand a piece of data over here and a different piece of data over there, and in fact they're referencing the same product or they're referencing the same brand. And it's this process of entity resolution, essentially reading text in a lot of cases, understanding this product title, that this phrase is the brand and this phrase is the product and this other phrase maybe is a flavor, for example. Doing that really at very, very large scale in a fully automated way. Of course, it's too big of a scale to do this in any manual way. And then we have kind of an internal knowledge graph that we map all that data into. And then we're able to, on top of that, really build a synthesized view of what's happening, connecting products, reviews, social media, Shopify stores, e-commerce, offline retail, etc. And then on top of this kind of synthesized view, we can do a whole bunch of things to generate unique and interesting insights. One example is something we talked about before, which is this predictor of emerging brands that we think are likely to be very large brands, as an example. And that kind of drove our process of finding emerging brands for investment, and is part of the Helio offering today.
Awesome. And now, Kathy, you've so with all this cool stuff, there must be some excellent results. So I know we went a little right brain to go deal with the people that like the pictures and the appeal to the heart, but now let's shift it back to the left brain side of the equation here. And what kind of results are you driving for clients based on the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'll even start with what were results that we're driving for ourselves as a Circle Up company, right? We've had 4 very successful exits, out of our portfolio. The 2% loss ratio on the credit portfolio. Can't mention too many names, but we've had a lot of acquisitions done by our customers. And one that, we have marketing rights for, Coca-Cola launched the Starlight product, and we've been doing some post-launch analysis, for instance, and is actually doing better than their most recent launch prior to that, called Dream World. So that's a analysis we just recently showed them, and they were pretty impressed that we can show them before they're seeing tons of results in POS that this product's doing better than previous launches. And as we all know, large CPGs are constantly launching new products. I've heard stats like 80% of the products are failing. If we can change that stat from 80 to 70 to 60%, that in itself will show the results of what Helio can do for our customers.
Awesome.
All right. That's phenomenal. So let's look to the future, if you would, Kathy. What's in store from a commercial standpoint for Helio as you start to think about building out your client portfolio and the capabilities that you are offering to them?
Definitely. So we are really good at the invest use case. So help me find, help me diligence brands, because that is something we've been doing for 7 years. We are now diving deep into the innovation use case. Help me figure out what the hottest trending thing on TikTok is so that I can think about that as I put a new product out into the marketplace. Help me understand what the attributes are of the fastest growing products under $5 million that, I may not be paying attention to because I may not be getting data from retailers like Erewhon, right, that are small and maybe not collaborating data-wise. So we're really focusing on help me put the right new products into market. Give me the confidence that the decisions I'm making are going to be better decisions than I've made in the past because I just didn't have access to this level of data. And then actually help me measure if that product is successful long before it shows up in a POS data set or in a panel data set where I'm typically measuring my product at. So that's where we are doubling down here for next year to 2 years.
Excellent. Well, you guys have a really interesting sort of lens through which to see things because of all the data that you get access to. So I'd be really just curious in general for what some of your bold predictions, maybe some of your hot takes are, where you see the industry going. I mean, through your lens, what are some of the thoughts you have on this space and how it's going to evolve over the next couple of years? Erik, maybe I'll start with you this time because I keep asking Kathy questions.
Yeah, one of the kind of interesting things that we're closely monitoring and Helio's got a close eye on is the plant-based food trend, specifically plant-based meats. As an example, a little while ago, there was a lot of investment interest in some of the more established brands in that space. I won't mention any names. And
please don't.
And Helio, I think, was a little bit pessimistic about some of the continued growth for some of the industry darlings. So that was a little bit of a contrarian opinion a little while ago, and now I think there's more industry acceptance of that point of view. But I'm back with another contrarian opinion, which is I don't think it's all downside in that space. There's a whole second wave, if you will, of emerging brands that are delivering very innovative plant-based foods, specifically plant-based meat substitutes. I will give one example, Jack and Annie's. Maybe you're familiar with that brand, but creating quote-unquote meatballs and quote-unquote tenders made out of jackfruit, growing very, very quickly, looks very, very promising. And that's not the only brand. We see a bunch of other emerging brands and more established brands that are growing very well. So we think that's a trend that's here to stay, despite all the pessimism you may be seeing in the news lately.
So it's like that old Gartner chart where you have the peak of irrationality and the trough of disillusionment, and now you're working your way back out of the trough of disillusionment up to something else.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, how about you?
Yeah, I think the time where brands had to go the traditional route to start in retail and then sort of grow their footprint through distribution, it is not as important as it used to be. Brands can start in the D2C space through their own Shopify sites or go right into Amazon. And through the marketing channels, you guys are even saying you're TikTok stars these days. We see brands go from 0 to 50 million in under a year.
Please don't use your high-level analytics to validate that thought.
Yeah, we'll check Helio.
I think you'll disabuse us of that notion in a matter of seconds.
But we see brands absolutely explode via social, via Amazon, and I think having a pulse on those data sets plus the traditional data sets is kind of where I believe the future is. And that's one of the reasons I'm here with Helio and why I think Helio is going to be a bit of a game changer. I hate using that word because it's overused, but a bit of a game changer in this space because we can watch everything that's going on at once versus having to bring in all these disparate data sets like CPGs traditionally do and having data analysts glue them together. And weeks later, you might get a readout. We can do this on the fly real time in our platform.
Thank you for that, Kathy and Erik. That's some really great contrarian kind of applications and understanding of where the industry is going. And it's good to see. The plant-based one is still making my head shake. It's like, yeah, that your contrarian prediction came true to form as we're all experiencing in this industry. I want to remind our audience that If you go to cpgguys.com, you can find all our content other than the merch store, the t-shirts and what have you. It's all free. So please feel free to stop by and check out episodes, links to other content. It's really the first stop on joining this community that is now 18,000 people strong. And if you think you or your company has some thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion, drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com, and maybe you can join us for a future episode of the podcast. And of course, while you're at cpgguys.com, go to the navigation bar at the top and click on ratings and reviews. Leave us a review, leave us a rating. We want your feedback. It's very important that we are educating to the topics that you want us to, because you're our audience. Why would we teach about things you have no interest in learning about? We want to talk about things that you're interested in. Kathy, Erik, Brian and I are incredibly grateful you took some time this afternoon to join us and talk about the revolutionary platform that started at Circle Up and has now be commercialized as Helio. Kathy, let me start with you. Can you tell us where our listeners can learn more if they want to talk to you about Helio and how it might apply to their businesses? Where should they go?
Yeah, just hop on your favorite browser and type in heliodata.com. You'll be able to contact us. You'll be able to learn more about the company. And there are a ton of free resources on our blog just to learn more about the outputs that Helio can do.
Kathy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us again.
Erik, thank you as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us. And I'll just maybe close with one more. If people are interested in seeing more trends for 2023, it's all there on blog.heliodata.com. I only gave the top trend, but there's 4 more for 2023 if you're interested.
We are going to include a link to the blog and that particular version of it, that particular entry through the digital liner notes of our podcast. So, Brian, I'm going to turn to you. I was very intrigued by today's conversation. I would love to hear your summary thoughts on what Kathy and Erik shared with us.
Well, I would love to hear some of yours too. But I mean, apart from not having had jackfruit meatballs on my bingo card of things I was going to talk about today, I always love it when things like that happen. But no, look, there's a few really big ideas in here that I think are really critical. And you both used a couple of words which were really sort of integrated, synchronized, real time, and the direction in which you're taking analytics in general, before we get into the specific applications, I think is a really important narrative, and it's an important competency for people to start to get their head around, which is that more and more of the data we're going to be using to make decisions isn't time-lagged rearview mirror stuff, but more real time. And I think that a lot of this, interestingly, is the way that e-commerce teams and people that have had access to user experience data and A/B testing data and things like that, I think a lot of this lives in the digital world. And I think you've done a really interesting job of bringing this by way of bigger decisions that companies are making, like whether to buy a company or not. You've been able to take that sort of data rhythm and apply it to decisions that historically were the purview of more analog data processes. So I love it when the digital world and the analog world come together in interesting ways. I think this is just a really fascinating way to do that. You talked a lot about the investment cases, which I think are terrific for brands that are really trying to understand where the world is going. But the most interesting thing to me in all of that was the next phase of implementations that you're using around internal innovation and then really just white space development. And it's almost like what you're allowing a brand manager to do is to have the same competencies and capabilities that like a portfolio manager has in an investment house. You're replicating their read on the world so that today, as a brand manager, I can make better decisions about whether to buy or build, because I'll know more I'll have a much clearer idea of what we're trying to build against and whether our company has the capabilities and the competencies to do that. I can take a more rigorous, data-based, strategic approach to deciding where I'm going to invest my resources for innovation and for growth. And I think that's awesome. And the last piece I think you both talked eloquently about is that data isn't just numbers, and your ability to read the qualitative world as well as the quantitative world in synchronous real time, and increasingly looking at the variety of places that that data comes from and being able to present that in an integrated way is super powerful. So thank you both for taking the time here to talk through what you're all up to at Helio. It was fascinating for me because I love stuff like this. As someone who used to try to sell PowerPoint-based lagged market research studies to people for years, I am, Kathy, I relate to the joy you must feel at being able to do this a little differently in your new world.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brian, for that comprehensive and poignant summary. I really appreciate it. And of course, I just want to call out the fact that Erik used the word neophyte in a conversation, and that alone earned him my immense respect as someone who loves to use underutilized words in the English language. But thank you for that. To our audience, I want to thank you for joining us. It was a great conversation today. Hopefully you learned a lot, because I certainly did. Nobody learns more about what's going on in this industry from this podcast than, frankly, Shri and I do, and today Brian as well. So thank you for joining, and we look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.